Hello and welcome to this short video on sampling. First, we'll just review the difference between a population and a sample, and then we will look at a sample selection overview. And the two main types are probability and non-probability sampling techniques. First, population versus sample. Well, your population is the entire group of interest that's being studied. So to go back to some of the earlier videos that we looked at, for example, we were interested in studying African American teens in foster care. So our population would be all African American teens that are in foster care. The sample is a selection or a subset of those teens because it's not often feasible to interview or survey an entire population. So here in this image to the right, we represent the population as people, and we take a subset of that population, which is a selection from it. It's important to note, though, that the population or group of interest represented here is people, but it need not be. It could be widgets or vials of blood. The point is that you need to first identify the target population for your research problem. So, for example, if your problem is the quality of customer service agents in the call center used by your organization, your population of interest would be all those customer service agents at that call center. And then you would need to have some method of selecting people from that total population and invite them to participate in your study. Note, though, that if the population of interest is small, say you had 100 customer service reps, it may be possible to examine every person within it and avoid sampling altogether. In this case, it's not called a sample, but a census. But if in fact a sample is needed or used, how that sample is taken is important, and it will determine what the researcher can claim about the overall population. So we'll just take a brief look at that on the next slide. Sample selection techniques. There are two main methods of selection, and they're broken down into whether they're probability or non-probability techniques. If you have a probability sample, the benefit is that it's generalizable, provided you've taken the correct number of elements from that population. It's generalizable to the population as a whole. And there's basically two requirements for that to be true. You would need to have every element or every person in that population with an equal non-zero chance of being chosen, and they need to be randomly chosen. For instance, you would need to assign a number to each member and then pull a number from a hat. That's an example of random selection. Of course, that sort of implies that we have some means of listing every person in the population so that they can be selected. So in survey sampling, generally, the population is assumed to be finite. That means that there's a list of them, of people or elements in that population, and we can randomly select from that list. The list of all the elements in a population is called a sample frame. The idea, of course, is that it's simply a list and exists in some form. For example, if I'm interested in all the employees in that call center, the list of employees may come from HR, and it's the employee numbers. Okay, so that's basically the explanation of a probability sample. The benefit is it's generalizable. Why is it generalizable? Because it uses random selection, and we select the correct number for the size of the population. And what this means in practice is that our sample is representative of the entire population of interest, as we note in the second item here on the slide. And that means if I have a generalizable probability sample, the qualities and characteristics of my sample can be generalized to the entire population. And Again, the reason that random selection is so important is because it avoids systematic bias. What do I mean by that? Well, let's use another example. Many people conduct online internet surveys or social media surveys, but they are not random selection of participants because the extent of the population isn't known. These are therefore non-random samples. They're considered voluntary samples, and they're subject to bias. Why? Because the people that participate in them self-select themselves into participation. So the characteristics of those who do that, opt to take an online internet survey, may be systematically different from those who don't. For example, you may only get younger participants in your study, or maybe the more tech-savvy participants. So you could be missing a whole swath of the population of interest. Other non-probability samples, not just internet surveys, include convenience sampling. What's an example of convenience sampling? Inviting your friends, relatives, or classmates to take your study, participate in your study. Or simply interviewing customers as they enter your store. That may seem random to you, but it's not. It's not, because you don't have a list of all your customers that you're randomly selecting for. You just have the ones that opted to come into your store on maybe Tuesday. That's not representative of your entire population in that case. But that's not to say that there isn't a case for non-probability sampling. For example, you may do purposive judgment sampling. Perhaps the phenomenon that you're interested in studying does not widely exist in the population. It's very difficult to find people like that. So you wouldn't necessarily be able to take a random sample of some population. So you as a researcher would specifically identify people that exhibit that particular phenomenon. I don't know what that might be. People have taken a certain drug for 6 months, for example, and survived. I mean, you may not randomly select from there. You're going to go after a certain population and sample that exhibit the characteristic that you need to study. So non-probability samples are great for pilot studies and exploratory purposes, for examining things that there is little known. There's very little theory already in existence. And it's not to say that non-probability samples do not have a useful purpose and that probability samples are perfect and that should be your preferred method. But it does limit what we can say about a population as a whole. And so non-probability samples are not necessarily generalizable to the whole population or to other contexts without further research studies being done and other samples being taken. So I hope that gives you some examples or ideas about why we look at the different sampling methods. And a lot of times in this course, when people conduct studies in their organizations, there's not a lot of need for sampling because they have access to the entire employee base, for example, in a small to medium enterprise. So you really aren't dealing with sampling, you're dealing with a census, all the employees in the organization. I hope that helps as you read the material about sampling. We are not calculating sample sizes in the course. There are online tools to help you do that based upon the level, margin of error, and the confidence that you want to have in your results. But for our purposes, you just need to be aware of the different types of sampling methods and then document that in your written proposal about how you propose to select participants for your study. Thanks for listening, and hope you have a great day.